Hi everyone, my name is John Potter. I'm the town manager in Brattleboro, Vermont, broadcasting from the BCTV studios with another edition of the Town Matters podcast. This podcast is a quick update on what's happening in Brattleboro town government. Today, I'll give you an update on the Selectboard special meeting held on Monday, April 20th, their regular meeting that was on Tuesday, April 21st, and their annual retreat, which was held on Thursday, April 30th. After all that, I'll review the agenda for their next regular meeting that will be on Tuesday, May 5th, and I'll also mention a few announcements before closing things out. So Monday, April 20th, the Brattleboro Select Board met in a joint meeting with the Hinsdale Select Board over in Hinsdale, New Hampshire, about Hinsdale Island and the Anna Marsh and Charles Hunt bridges. During that meeting, the chair of the Brattleboro Select Board invited the Hinsdale Select Board to the Amtrak ribbon cutting event being planned for June 24th. There was discussion at this meeting about moving the fence back on the Anna Marsh Bridge, and there was also quite a bit of discussion and back and forth with the Hinsdale police chief about concerns of how this whole area is managed. And in the end, both boards decided to put together a working group that will continue to discuss the bridges and the island and try to come up with a plan to bring back to both select boards to get their approvals about moving forward with a project on the islands and the bridges. So that was Monday the 20th. On Tuesday the 21st, the next night, the Brattleboro Select Board met at their regular meeting at the Municipal Center. And on this agenda, there were initially 5 items on the consent agenda, but a member of the public requested that the board remove one of those items and put it on under regular business, which the board decided to do. So there were 4 items left on the consent agenda, which was ultimately approved by a vote of 5-0. And the 4 things that got approved on that were the award of a $360,916 low bid contract to Bazin Brothers Trucking to resurface the pavement on several roads in the Oak Grove corridor, including Coombs and Baldwin Streets, Oak Grove, Clark, and Moreland Avenues. Authorization for staff to apply for a Department of Justice FY25 comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance use site-based program grant of up to $1.3 million, with Brattleboro potentially serving as a fiduciary for several other towns interested in implementing situation tables. There was approval of a contract with Verkada to replace the security cameras at the police station in the amount of up to $50,000, and ratification of a settlement in the matter of Kelly v. Eaton on the advice of council and VLCT, the town's insurer. Under regular business, the board took up the High and Green Street intersection improvements item, which had been on consent, and under the discussion for this item, there was comments around the bid, stormwater runoff, how the school drop-off works on Green Street, and several other matters. In the end, there was a motion to award the High and Green Street reconfiguration project to Slate Rock Timber in the amount of $30,340, and that passed by a vote of 4-0 to 1 abstained. Next, the board officially established a Human Services Committee for the town. They discussed the number of people to be on that committee, and there was a motion to establish a Town Human Services Committee consisting of 7 members for the purpose of making recommendations to the Select Board regarding the allocation of human services funds in the town budget, and that passed by a vote of 5-0. The chair of the Select Board announced a number of vacancies on various town boards and committees. So if you're interested in serving the town, please look for that list and contact the town manager's office to apply. Following that, the next item was the monthly budget update for fiscal year 26 through February. And under that item, there was discussion about the fact that expenditures are running slightly below plan and revenues are doing well, running slightly above plan. So that is a good situation for the town. There was discussion about the EMS collection rate and the upcoming audit, and there was no motion on the budget update. The next item was a solid waste update and a first reading of an ordinance change to implement the new solid waste program. There was a motion to ratify the decision to sign a contract with Casella Waste Management, Inc. for the manual curbside pickup and disposal of solid waste and recycling for a term to end on June 30th, 2027, next year. And that passed by a vote of 5-0. And also there was discussion about the solid waste ordinance changes on that first reading, which will come back at their next meeting. After solid waste, the board had a good conversation with Planning Director Sue Fillion and DPW Director Dan Tyler regarding Stormwater Utility Initiative. Under this discussion, they talked about the costs of a consultant to look into this stormwater utility idea and potentially develop a plan for that. They talked about partial funding that could come from the state for the impervious surfaces on the interstate, as well as from other properties in town that are not currently taxed. And there was no motion on this item, but it was a helpful conversation for the board to consider this at a later time. Next, there was a presentation around a procurement policy that was adopted by a vote of 5-0. Final item that was discussed on the 21st was Vermont's General Assistance Motel Program. The board heard about the work of an organization called End Homelessness Vermont. They talked about placing limits on the GA Assistance Motel Program. They talked about costs to the town of implementing that program in Brattleboro. They talked about problems with the motels, and there was a discussion about the fact that with 2% of the state population, why was Brattleboro hosting 19% of the state's motel program vouchers? There was also a discussion about contributions in other towns like Newfane or Putney. And a motion was put on the floor to postpone this item until additional information could be pulled together. But the chair adjourned the meeting before that motion could be voted on. Two items were not able to be addressed on the 21st, and those are coming back at their May 5th meeting. So I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the third meeting that's happened since our last update was the Selectboard retreat, which happened on Thursday, April 30th. It was held at Roach Hall up at the School for International Training. At the retreat, the board did make a bunch of committee appointments under regular business first before they got into their retreat. Those were the ones that would originally have been made on April 21st, but in order to keep quorums and move committees forward, they made them under their retreat as an exception. But then Sue Fillion, the planning director, took over the helm and facilitated the board retreat. She first did a review of a number of town plans that are already in effect and moving forward, and those included things like the hazard mitigation plan, the walk bike action plan, the housing action plan, downtown design plan, canal street corridor plan, and the 2026 town plan that the Planning Commission's been working on with the townwide priorities that are getting developed in that. Following that update, the board took up the topic of past select board priorities. So really the big goal of this meeting was to see what the select board wanted to focus on for priorities for the period from 2026 through 2028. And they started with a review of what was on the list for the past few years. So they reviewed past select board priorities, and then they dove into a conversation about upcoming priorities for the period from 2026 through 2028. And I have to say that I was really excited to see that the focus of what the board is interested in has really shifted this year. And over the last 3 retreats, select board retreats that we've had over the past 3 years, really a lot of the discussion was around public safety and public health issues and child safety zones and community safety and all those types of things. This year, there was a marked difference. This year, what was emerging as priorities were things more like economic development and generating revenues and doing a stormwater utility and working on transportation infrastructure. In fact, those were the kinds of things that emerged as their top priorities coming up. So a good shift. I think it demonstrates that things like One Brattleboro and the situation table and the investments that the town has made in public safety may be paying off finally, and we're seeing opportunities to shift the emphasis of what the town is working on towards things like economic development and vitality and these other items. So more to come on those priorities because they will be coming back to a regular board meeting where the select board can finalize them for directing staff in the upcoming years. A couple of other items that were taken up during the board retreat on April 30th, those were a discussion about the fiscal year 28 budget development process and also a discussion about general process improvements that would improve the way the select board works. The next select board meeting is a regular meeting on Tuesday, May 5th at 6:15 p.m., and this is what will be on the agenda. There will be a consent agenda with 8 items on it. The first item is consideration to approve about 50 liquor and tobacco license renewal applications. Then there are some items for the Rec and Parks Department. One is a consideration of a bid to replace the Kiwanis shelter roof at Living Memorial Park. This would be an award of $34,107 used from the FY26 Capital Fund. Also, a project for $85,000 to do rust and corrosion repair on the skating rink columns, and this would be out of the generational improvement budget. The next item on the consent agenda is the annual financial plan for VTrans for town highways, which is based on the approved town budget. Then there are a couple of equipment purchases for the Department of Public Works, a $197,000 purchase of a wheel loader, and a $275,162 purchase of a dump truck using funds in the DPW vehicle capital account. Then there is an item on a E911 road naming of a place that will be called Swan Pond Lane, and I think that is off of South Street. Another item on the consent agenda is authorizing application for a Building Resilient Communities grant from Vermont Emergency Management for a scoping study on a slope failure at Whetstone Village. And then there is an item for a sub-grant agreement to be able to convey $750,000 of state funding to Winston Prouty for water infrastructure development as part of the village at Winston Prouty housing development. And finally, on consent is a request from the Brattleboro Coalition for Active Transportation to have the select board ask the state highway agency for bicycle safety signage to be placed on state highways. That is the consent agenda. Then the first thing on the agenda after that is unfinished business. So a rounding out of the select board's conversation on Vermont's General Assistance Motel Program, follow up from what they were talking about on April 21st. And after that, other items from April 21st, the town meeting requested EMS study and committee appointments. Under regular business, the board will get a presentation from town staff on an intersection study that has been done at Western Ave and William Street, that general area, with input from the Traffic Safety Committee. After Western Ave intersection study, the board will do a second reading of solid waste ordinance changes and potentially take up those changes in the town code. Next, the town attorneys will present a records retention policy for consideration by the board. And finally, under regular business on May 5th, the board is going to revisit its 2026-2027 rules of procedure for potential tweaks to what is in their rules. Few announcements. The top floor of Brooks Memorial Library will be closed to all occupancy on Wednesday, May 6th and Thursday, May 7th due to construction. The children and teen areas, restrooms, and community room will all be inaccessible during this time. A small browsing collection of books for children and teens and books on reserve will be available on the ground level of the building. And to learn more about the renovations happening at Brooks, please visit brattleboro.gov/projects. The town clerk's office will be closed to the public every Wednesday starting on May 13th. This change is necessary due to the significant volume of work handled by the town clerk's office. Closing one day a week will provide staff with uninterrupted time to focus on day-to-day administrative tasks and larger ongoing projects. Many services can be accessed anytime by visiting the town's website. The town will be holding a committee fair this spring. At this event, you can speak directly with those currently serving on committees and find a group that interests you. Joining a board or committee is a great way to volunteer, make friends, and take part in your local government. The committee fair will be happening on Wednesday, May 13th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. at Brooks Memorial Library. And final announcement, the Recreation and Parks Department will be celebrating its newly renovated outdoor pickleball courts this weekend, May 2nd. The next time you visit Living Memorial Park, be sure to check them out. The Fred Harris Memorial Pickleball Courts are located just outside the skating rink, and they are amazing. You can learn more about opportunities to play pickleball in Brattleboro by visiting the town's website at brattleboro.gov/pickleball. So that's your update. Please reach out to me at the town manager's office or by emailing townmanager@brattleboro.gov if you have any thoughts for what you'd like to hear on the podcast, or if you want to discuss any matter of town business further. As always, there's lots of additional information on the town website, brattleboro.gov, about what's discussed at the select board meeting, so please check in there for agendas, reports, and backup materials. Thanks for listening, and we'll be broadcasting again soon.